Hello, hello, welcome. Okay, it is that time. So people might still be trickling in, but I want to go ahead and get started with the program. So we really wanted to have this moment because there has been so much like cancellation and like rescheduling of like everybody's lives. Just having a moment like this to connect and to touch base with each other a little bit and be intentional about it, I feel is really important. So the first step of that is some of you have already taken it, but if you go into the oh heck yeah, here's everybody. Hello everybody, welcome. So the first thing I'm asking is if we go into the chat on the right side, you'll see it on the top right of your screen, and there's a survey link that you can fill out. The one that M posted you can go to. And it's a really brief survey, and it is part of our intention to better understand how the way that we speak and convene and host these things affect people, and how we can collect some of the information on that and understand a little bit better. Yes, it's up top, Vivian.
Yeah. I don't think they can see it if they haven't.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I got it.
Thank you. Thanks for pointing that out, Vivian. Great. So I just want everybody to take a minute. You can look at that survey. It's real quick. I'd love to answer questions about it. It's based in one of my favorite cognitive behavioral therapy practices, which is just a way to check in with yourself in a really like concrete way. So as people are doing that, I want to speak to this kind of interesting moment. Kind of interesting. It's like understatement of the century. This is a really intense moment for people and our relationship to where we live and our relationship to our spaces as in enclosures, and also the distance we are now taking from or maybe taking from the land and the landscape and being outside. And with the land acknowledgement today, I think it's really appropriate to talk about and to really think about sort of the emotional effects of forced removal and forced space. And like, there's no way to make these things equivalent, but I just want to like bring to mind the intensity of that and the emotional intensity of that, and our relationships to having freedom of space, and how our local tribes are fighting for that and working for that all the time, and that we as allies have to recognize that the kind of freedom that we may be feeling is constricted now. Is this constricted for many people in different ways and for different reasons, but that in this moment, if we can find some empathy and really realize that what we are trying to promote is having the freedom of movement and freedom of expression and freedom of the capacity to engage with things like this and crises like this with equality and with each other in mind. And that's just really been up for me recently and thinking about that. And so I want to direct you all to Real Rent Duwamish, considering that the work continues and the work needs to continue, and that we're all doing our best to support each other with mutual aid as we can, and that is still a worthy and really present cause as things change. And the leadership of the tribes of this area are people that we need to be looking to. So this is part of what's happening too, is that, yeah, please, go ahead.
Nope, go ahead. Never mind.
So our last quarter has been about culture and environment, and this is a pretty timely moment to think about how we as a culture respond to crisis, and how subcultures within our community respond to crisis. And that is the backbone of this moment of mutual aid, of backing each other up and finding our leaders and supporting them. Because this is the moment. This is the intensity of this is a moment that we can really find ourselves allied in a really strong way. Great. So thank you. I don't know if any new humans came in just now, but welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. I wanted to scoot into our next section, and I've asked all the S2 staff to bring forward a article that they feel has been really interesting, because there's been so much information, and like I know I have had like BuzzFeed overload of just like everybody has an opinion about everything, and I was thinking that having a face and some body like attached to some information would be a helpful way to gather our thoughts. So I wanted to pass it off to Jack first to speak to an article that she found.
Thanks, Una. Hi, everyone. So I was kind of researching today and just really interested in everyone's thoughts about the broader climate change implications of Corona. Just kind of following.
Oh, I think I lost your audio. Can others hear that?
Yeah, can you say that again, Jack? You got quiet for a sec.
Oh, where did it cut out?
You can just start from the top. We got about 3 words.
Okay. So I was most interested in opening the discussion about the global emissions implications of Corona. Mm-hmm. And so I was researching that today. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. And came across a BBC article, which I will throw in the chat. It's called Air Pollution and CO2 Fall Rapidly as Virus Spreads. There it is. And so I just found it kind of interesting that people are tracking the emissions over places like New York, where traffic levels are estimated to be down 35%. Compared to this time last year. The emissions of carbon monoxide, which is produced mainly by trucks and cars, have fallen 50% for multiple days this week. There is a 5 to 10% drop in the carbon dioxide levels over New York. And then I was kind of poking around. So that article kind of gives you a good summary, but I also found other stats. Researchers have calculated that the improvements in air quality in the Hubei province of China since Corona has improved to the point that it could save the lives of 4,000 children under 5 years old and 73,000 adults over 70. Whoa. So it's just kind of interesting because it's basically saying that the air quality improvements could save more lives than Corona is destroying or killing. And obviously, that's not to say that this is in any way a positive situation for humanity, but it's just an interesting point that with everything slowing down and stopping, or emissions greatly reducing right now, the impact of that we're seeing. And so I also wanted to talk about, open this up to everyone. Do we think that there's going to be more of a lasting impact on our thought and then behavior change when it comes to extractivism and the way that we use resources, or just where we derive our value and pleasure? as humans. So that's kind of a very broad topic that I wanted to touch on.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jack. I really appreciate that. I wanted to offer, if anyone briefly wants to respond, you're welcome.
I do.
Please.
This is Vivian.
Hi, Vivian.
Hi, I was looking at some of these articles this morning too, around China and emissions dropping. What I'm kind of interested in about it is they're not really expecting this to be long-term anything, and in fact, they're kind of worried that it's going to be worse because when it comes back, all these in China, it's mostly factories that stopped using coal that have improved the air quality, sort of. And they're just afraid that when it comes back, they're going to need to ramp up and like kind of make up for the lost time and then pump out more, whatever.
Right.
Which is interesting because I think there's probably an opportunity somewhere on these levels to create some sort of infrastructure in this time that stuff is not happening, to make better practices. And that's what I think about everything related to Corona, actually. Like, it's like a good time to put in new infrastructures as old infrastructures are crumbling. In this situation, I'm not sure what that would be, but that's what I've been thinking about.
Yeah, thank you. That's definitely, I feel like you are not the only person whose mind is on that. Because we are seeing some serious failures in larger structures. And what can, and yeah. So I also wanted to bring people's attention back again. Natalie, if you wouldn't mind posting the shared doc in our chat. So there's a shared Google Doc where we're taking notes. So like Vivian, that'd be a perfect moment if anybody wants to respond, because I want us to keep moving. That's a great place to do it. So Natalie just posted that. Again, you're welcome to jump in and edit that, or read along. Thank you, Jack. I appreciate it so much. Tyler, can I pass the torch to you to speak on what you're bringing today?
Yeah, thanks, Una. This is Tyler here. I kind of have sort of a similar way to sort of segue into this conversation. And I was also sort of interested in the intersectionality between climate change and the environment and COVID-19. I feel like there's plenty of information out there nowadays, seeing, every sort of news headline be about coronavirus. But I think it's sort of an interesting conversation to have on sort of solutions and practices globally that are ongoing to address coronavirus are in some cases sort of the same solutions that we could apply for climate resilience. Sort of just backstepping a little bit, I think it's really unfortunate that coronavirus has become it's sort of placed green infrastructure on the back burner, to be up and honest. I think that is significantly impacted by the economic decline that we're facing globally. And so we're seeing similar trajectories post-recession, where if we are getting hit with a recession, green infrastructure is going to be kind of put on the back burner. And then right after that recession really ends, things are really going to dramatically pick up again, almost negating any sort of carbon reductions that occurred during the recession period. But with all that said, I think sort of the most silver lining thing that I saw in this is sort of what Vivian's been saying on being very opportunistic about sort of tragic incidents like this. And for me, I see, a few things where these are lessons in which, we can take our understanding of how we globally address a pandemic like this and apply those same systems where, if we're using preventative measures to not overload, medical infrastructure, that those same preventative measures will apply for climate change resilience. So, less people being impacted by air pollution, respiratory challenges, or forest fires or droughts and things like that. And then also it's an interesting showcase of global resiliency and how nations can actually work together in ways to contribute in significant ways. We all are sort of facing different levels of impact right now, but by understanding what other nations are doing, and if we're willing to engage in those same practices, that could be a really wonderful opportunity. Uh, and then, sort of lastly, I think it's sort of a morbid but comforting reminder in a way that we are never and can never separate ourselves from the natural world. Um, as we're sort of seeing, climate change increase the risk of diseases, increase the risk of, you know, habitat destruction and vulnerability that human populations face. At the same time, there's a lot that we can engage with by understanding the natural world and sort of continuing to work alongside it. So those are some of the interesting things that I want to just posit out in the world. So
Thank you, Tyler.
thanks.
Yeah.
Jack, do you have the links for the things that Tyler was referencing?
Yeah.
Oh, just to real quick, as Jack is posting the links, there is just like this really fun, very nerdy sort of statistical analysis website. It's sort of similar to WHO, but they're actually using different statistic variables from a few different data population sets. And I think that's going to be the third bullet in there, Jack. But if it's something that you're interested in on just like learning everything there is to know about coronavirus and or anything else, it's just like they're pretty graphs, good data. It's wonderful. They're using really advanced statistical analysis too. So it's like a new thing that we're seeing in practice. So it's just fascinating stuff.
Heck yeah. Thank you. That's very exciting to hear about. I love it. I want to give us a minute if anybody wants to reply. Feel free. I also wanted to mention we are going to be leaving this conversation open till Sunday. So we're going to get that Google Doc out and people are going to be able to chat about this and like keep engaging. So don't feel pressure right now. You'll definitely still get to participate, but I'd love to open it up if anybody has a response.
And I just made our community note-taking document public. So if you're still having problems, let me know in the chats because I'm still getting requests. So hopefully it says it's public and anyone can have access, but let me know if you're still unable to have access to it.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thanks.
Yeah. Sweet. All right. Love having y'all here. Thanks for chiming in. Natalie, do you want to jump in with your article?
Yeah. So my name is Natalie, and I wanted to open up the conversation a little bit about the positive environmental impacts that places are experiencing from COVID-19. I've been reading a lot, as I'm sure most of us have, a lot of articles that can seem a little scary at times. And so I found a few articles that offer a little glimmer of hope right now. And so I came across an article from ABC News that was from a few days ago, which shows a once cloudy Venice canal, and it's now clear enough to see fish as the virus halts tourism in the city. And so with the fish returning, they've seen swans return, there's been dolphin sightings, and the community hasn't remembered a time when the canal has been this clear, which I think is really cool. But the article does make it clear that this isn't a sign of less polluted water. A lot of tests would have to be run in order to determine that, but really it's a sign of less turbulation. The canal is heavily trafficked by boats, so it tosses up a lot of sediments. So now that the tourism is halted, the sediments has been able to settle and the water is clear again. So one, it's a little bit of a glimmer of hope in a dark situation, but it also kind of shows how human impacts the environment and how tourism impacts places and spaces. And this is the same place where I think it was just a few months ago in Venice, they were experiencing really, really bad flooding. They had one of the highest tides in more than 50 years, which caused a lot of damage in the same area. And so now Italy is experiencing, as much as the whole world is, another tragedy and disaster. So I thought this article just offered a little glimmer of hope in these uncertain times. Because I know for myself, I've been reading a lot, and it can seem kind of dark and uncertain. So I'm just curious if other folks have seen similar articles, of these glimmer of hopes or good news, or what this means to you.
Can I chime in?
Yeah.
I was just thinking with what you're saying that happened in Italy, I'm wondering how it'll have an effect on like our local Puget Sound area with our orcas and like all the cruise ships not, being functioning right now, and the lack of boats on the water, if it'll have a positive effect for our fish and wildlife out here.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I wonder, does anyone have like favorite resources for checking in with like health in the Puget Sound that they love, that we could be like, yeah, if Natalie, if you have some.
Yeah, I know Puget Soundkeeper Alliance. They always post articles and information that is specific to the Puget Sound, hence their name. But they're my go-to, one of my go-to resources. But I'm sure there's a vast amount, but that's just one off the top of my head.
Yeah. Sick. So cool. Thank you so much.
My mind goes first to Puget Soundkeeper as well. I think they're kind of seen as the leader in monitoring impact on the Puget Sound.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I want to chime in on is just like how fascinating it is socially that populations can start seeing these sort of obvious changes in sort of, I guess, water health or environmental health. And I'm interested if that might have sort of an impact on people's awareness and people's involvement with sort of better environmental practices, both from an individual scale on sort of their own carbon reductions, but then also from a larger scale on sort of their involvement in political structures and systems. So it's interesting. Like, I'm sure that people in Venice relatively happy to see some dolphins. I bet. I don't know. I'd be happy to see some dolphins.
I'm curious too, to that point, and back to Vivian's point earlier, on the possible impacts that we're going to see when things turn around. What kind of assessment might go into place in terms of how production is addressed when we're seeing these really dramatic responses to like really immediate shifts to the environment, shockingly rapid shifts to the environment, and what impact that might have on policy, regulation, consumer habits, industry shifts and standards. There's been so much speculation for so long about what can happen, what's real, what's not, and we're getting that very tangible, quantifiable evidence right meow.
Yep.
So I'm very curious about how that's going to open up a wider conversation about human behavior and climate impact.
Thank you guys. I appreciate it. Em, can I, as your front and center at the moment, can I toss to you about your articles?
For sure. So I opted to talk not specifically about an article, but just about the plethora of resources that have become available right now. The ones that have come across my plate, and as I think someone mentioned earlier, there's so many resources that it's almost dizzying. But I have just summarized a few sources that I have found particularly succinct and applicable and useful. So I wanted to share them with this group, and all of these can be redistributed widely. The first is the COVID Mutual Aid for Seattle. That's a Facebook group that's been put together. They have been really good about having prompt responses, specifically around neighbor-to-neighbor support. In their Facebook page is also some links to some surveys. So if you have the capacity to support others in need in the community right now, there's a survey you can fill out about how you can support. If you are in need in the community right now, there's also a survey you can fill out. And those are available at least in English and Spanish, and they may be making more languages available as well. The second resource that stood out to me was the coronavirus. I just got this link like maybe an hour ago. Washington State has created a specialized website, coronavirus.wa.gov. It's being maintained by the Joint Information Center. It includes statistics on what's going on, multilingual resources, hotlines that you can call, what you can do, and some just kind of best practices for us Washingtonians. It's got news updates and kind of like the latest information. Some of the representatives from district, can't remember, the South End here in Seattle have done a pretty good job of summarizing, it's to the state reps, have done a really good job summarizing resources for the coronavirus. What district are you? 34th. 34th. They have made available $200 million as part of a public health response. They've posted recommendations, updates around school closures, and guidance resources related to that, as well as a resource list for of support for workers and small businesses. So really, really solid details there, as well as around COVID-19 testing. And then on the topic of small business and workers, there's a Greater Seattle Area Economic Impact Survey, and I want to be sure to distribute that as well. So if you haven't seen this yet and you work for a Seattle-based business, or you run a Seattle-based business, or know someone who does, distribute this survey. The more broad data we can get, and especially the more data from ground level and frontline organizations, the more information we're going to have to leverage and funnel funds and resources to our community. Mm-hmm. And then I also just wanted to point out that the city offices, the Offices of Economic Development, the Office of Arts and Culture, have been doing a really good job of staying up to date with resources for specific groups. So if you're an artist and being impacted, Arts and Culture has a bunch of funding leads, resource leads, things like that, and other kind of specialized segmented groups. And a lot of our council members have been doing a great job keeping on top of things. Mm-hmm. And the last thing that I want to mention is that I spent last week as a delegate to the Creative Climate Leadership Summit for North America. So I was in Arizona. And one of the things that we decided to do as a cohort was draft a community response. And I wanted to bring that up in the context of our conversation today, because we've been talking at Sustainable Seattle for the last 3 months about the relationship of culture and the environment. And I felt really privileged to be a part of that conversation with peers from across the continent. About trends that we see about specifically the role of culture at times of crisis. So I've been a part of drafting that response, and it's going to be made available on the Creative Climate Leadership Global Network on Sunday. So we're still doing like the last pass of revision. So I wanted to share that link with you all as well. And if you're curious about it, I'd be happy to give you a preview.
Yeah.
But hit me up offline for that.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the talking about the mutual aid stuff that's come up has been so powerful and so moving. And that was such a fast turnaround, and watching people organize so quickly and just like be on the ground and be there for each other has been super inspiring. To that end, I want to ask y'all to join me in a little thought process. There's 2 more things I want to do with the remaining 20 minutes that we have of our conversation. Thank you all so much for listening to all those words and hearing all the things. Just a reminder, all of these links we're going to post, they're in the chat, but we're also going to post them later. So lots of words. Good. Glad you're here. This time I would love to hear what you guys have to say. something I've been thinking about, a question I think about a lot. And I have two questions, but I'm just going to do one for now, and I'll post the other one later so we can talk about it more. The one that I have for everybody is if you could take a minute and just really think to yourself, what is coming up as a really big priority for you personally right now. And let's perhaps, not that we can segment our lives in this way, but perhaps let's keep it to our work in environmentalism or with regard to community, climate work, with regard to this region, like work you are doing in this region. And think about a priority that feels really urgent for you. Like, for example, one that's coming up for me is staying connected, and making sure that I don't lose touch with people that I don't see often in this work. So that's one. And also, I want to challenge you to think that maybe this priority is something you're having a hard time engaging with right now because things may be overwhelming or it might feel distant. So if we could all take a minute and think about that. I actually want to invite each of us, after we think about it, to speak to it briefly. And you can speak to it in the chat if you want to. I will offer you each a chance to talk too. So let's just take 30 seconds or so, just think for ourselves. Cool. Thanks, y'all. So I'm just going to go down the little list, starting with myself. One priority, I said mine a bit about staying connected. I think one I want to add to that is I really want to figure out, it's important to me to figure out what is the most urgent thing in my like close community of oh, hello, friend. There you go. Who is being in touch, not just in touch, but figuring out a priorities list with my close community, figuring out ways to plan. I wanted to offer a chance for Bethany to speak if you'd like to.
I'm sorry, I'm not really understanding the question, I don't think.
For sure. Let me see if I can say it a different way. What is a priority that's coming up for you right now? Like, as times are changing, as stuff is coming up about coronavirus, like what is a thing that feels most important for you to engage with right now? Either one that feels easy to engage with or one maybe that feels really hard to engage with.
I guess that there's been two things that have been really nagging at me and at the top of my worry list, I guess. And it's not really, the first one's not really environmentally related, but I'm concerned about, with everyone being at home with their families and kind of confined, it brings up concerns for me about domestic violence issues, also suicidal issues. And the other one that concerns me that is environmentally related is all of this excess hand washing and using of plastic gloves and throwaway, washing things and sustainably. I'm concerned about the kind of trash and waste that's being output by this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Em, would you like to go next?
Yeah, and actually, I'd just like to comment on something that Bethany said. I really appreciate you bringing up the concerns about domestic violence, and would actually offer that that's very much an environmental issue, especially when we understand the connections between public health. Not always, but often, domestic violence is also violence against women, which is rooted in a lot of economic legacy and a lot of things going on. So we have seen there's been tons of research to show that women's empowerment and addressing violence against women has direct economic and environmental benefits. So I really appreciate you bringing that up, and I'll try to find some resources for you on that. One of the things that's coming up for me right now is just a reminder of the importance of community-based social networks. And we sometimes jargonly call it social technologies. And there's also an enormous amount of research and evidence and community-based knowledge about how these social networks are really the essential foundational kind of fabric of disaster resiliency and emergency response. And I think, we've been seeing that in practice. We've also been seeing how it's eroded and broken down. I want to draw attention to the leadership that we've seen in our region by the Lumi Nation, which has been showing extraordinary precedent for community-based interpersonal disaster response and resiliency based on work that the nation has been doing for about a decade in building community social cohesion. And there have been civic governments and federal governments around the world looking to them for their leadership. And there's an article I can share based on that too. So community resiliency, social networks, continuing to build that up, that's at the front of my mind.
Thank you, Em. Jack, how about you?
Yeah, I have two. I would say the more personal one is just knowing how, as a freelance worker who is having hours cut, I don't have a lot of disposable income, but I want to do my part to support our local economy. And so finding resource lists on how I can best engage and support local businesses right now. Like, I don't feel like I have the capacity to just buy a bunch of gift cards, but if there are local businesses that are offering, pickups or deliveries, I don't even know if that's the best option, but just knowing, like with Northwest Film Forum, being able to stream videos online instead of going to the cinema, that's a great option. So just finding other resource lists and how to support our local economy right now. And then on the more global scale, I really want to know how can we hold on to the lessons of this time once we're on the other side of it. So a lot of us, in this chat, like, we already live a pretty low carbon lifestyle, or we try to, but for others, how can we kind of shift that lifestyle from the way it used to be to more of this time, like slowing down and traveling less, just focusing on engaging with our friends and family, and how can we make those connections between this pandemic and climate change as phenomenons that require global systems change.
Thank you. Oh, I appreciate it. So I just wanted to mention both Jamila and Lace have mentioned that they've got a lot of background noise where they are, so they're going to be putting stuff into the chat. So if you guys want to read that, I can also read it out loud later, and it will end up in the Google Doc. Also, the next person on the list is John. I know John's been in and out of the chat, so I wanted to offer you a chance to respond if you would like to. If you'd like to pass, that is also okay.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, yeah, my internet's been in and out.
Welcome, we're glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, what I've kind of been thinking most about is it's amazing our potential to take collective action when we need to. And I just can't believe like how fast everything has happened. Like everything's getting shut down, like in Seattle, and all over the world too. I mean, it's much more extreme in some other places. My friends in France, and they're like on full lockdown mode right now, where it's like basically martial law. And we haven't seen anything like this in history except in like wartime situations. And what frustrates me is that we're in the midst of something much worse than the coronavirus that, has more than like a 1%, coronavirus has what, like we don't know how many percent, but it's like a very low percentage mortality rate. But climate change has possibly a 100% mortality rate. So why can't we get it together? Why can't we do this on climate? Because the entire fate of the planet depends upon it. And like, I kind of would like us to, like, the takeaway from, for us as a society from this, it'd be really great if we could all realize, wow, if we all get together and act collectively, we can accomplish anything. And this proves that. And I want that to be the takeaway, but I don't hear enough people talking about it. I don't hear the mainstream media talking about it. And my fear is that we're going to end this whole thing and everything's gonna go back to normal. People are going to be like excited to go out and consume. And, it'll be a real missed opportunity. So I'm kind of trying to think of, like, how can we, I don't know, make sure that doesn't happen.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. That is one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation. So I feel affirmed that that came up. Yeah. And then next on the list is Kaniko91, if you would like to speak. Sorry, I don't have your first name.
Hi,
Hey.
it's Oniko. Yeah, sorry, I don't know why I have that login. Just to quickly react to John's point and be a little bit sarcastic, I guess. What I felt and read about the coronavirus is that it just impacts everyone. And so there is a response. While sustainability, we know that it will impact everyone, but a lot of people in privileged positions will be able to bring up barriers and protect themselves much longer. So the urgency is less than, for coronavirus, even if you are rich and famous, you can get it. And that's what has been happening. So I think that might play into the rapidity of response. As for what I'm thinking and what I'm concerned about these days, on the positive note, I'm super excited about, of course, all the CO2 emission reduced by these factories closing and people staying at home, but also how all knowledge-based companies are exploring working from home, and how if we manage to make it work, then it might become more part of the normal to stay at home and work from home and not commute. And also conferences going virtual, that's huge, I think. Just like if people stopped flying around for conferences all the time because they realize that it's possible to do it virtually, I would be really excited about it. On the downside, I work with clients I consult with them to help with environmental sustainability mainly. And basically it just hasn't been their priority for the past months or so, because everyone is doing like emergency response, business continuity plans, and they just don't have the mindset at environmental reporting and reducing their emissions. I mean, it happens, but it's just a different mindset that they have right now. And depending on how long this crisis will continue, it's just taking away resources from resources and time from sustainability as such. So that's a little bit downside. And I understand why they do this, but I would also like them to keep on doing the good work that they have been doing. So it's like a little hard to balance the urgency of coronavirus versus environmental sustainability.
Heard. Thank you so much. Our next person is Lace. Lace wrote in the chat, so I just want to give people a chance to peek at that. And I wanted to toss the ball to Natalie. Just hear from you.
So I'm going to touch on just two things that I think have kind of been briefly touched on as well. But one is, Jack mentioned it, is supporting the local economy and small businesses. I used to work at a restaurant. I started when I was 11 years old, and I worked there for about 11 years. And they're a small cafe in the Ravenna district, and they've been experiencing some really hard times, just like a lot of small business owners and restaurants and folks that own bars and breweries. And they're worried about closing their doors altogether and whether they'll be able to open up after this is over. And that has kind of sparked my interest in how can we as a community support local business, especially if you come from a like the serving industry. I feel like it hits a little bit deeper, but how we can keep our local businesses in Seattle afloat. And something else that has been touched on is staying connected. And I think what we're doing right now is definitely a resource that I hope is going to become more common, because as we all start the social distancing and the isolation, I think that being in a community with people that have similar interests, where you can share your thoughts and your anxieties and talk through these really important deep issues, I think now more than ever, even if it's a virtual community like this, we may not be able to see each other's faces, but to hear that voice to voice and knowing that we're all kind of on the same page and we're all in this together, I think community is so important, and how we can kind of collectively have, or how we can spread this message. I know that we only have 12 people on the chat, but I would love to see this in a few weeks when we have larger numbers, and how we can all connect together, and how we can share this resource with others.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm feeling really grateful for being able to connect in this way too.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask Rich if you would like to speak next.
Oops, super sorry, y'all. I was catching up with the roommates. Let's see. I don't know that I have anything particularly to add. I think everyone touched on good points. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I was a little caught off guard.
You're great.
I'll give me a couple minutes.
Great, we can come back to you for sure.
Yeah, cool.
No worries. Thanks for being here. Yeah, Tyler, how about you?
Yeah, I think everyone's made some really amazing points. Some things that I sort of just wanted to bring up is how sort of this pandemic has showcased a lot of systematic failures, I think, that we see in our governance, in our sort of economy and political structure. And so I'm in a way reassured that with such sort of high level of collaboration that is still happening, both at a local and state government level and up to sort of an individual neighbor to neighbor level, it's amazing to see sort of the power of community resilience at its core. When we're hit with such dire circumstances, we are all still managing to find ways to contribute back to our community, and I think that's sort of an amazing ordeal. And it's great to see local businesses, small businesses, still finding ways to adapt. A big thing that got hit for me is that farmer markets were closed down, and that not only impacts all the vendors there, but specifically the producers, the farmers who, are now unable to really stop their production or stop their produce, and have nowhere to go to provide local and safe foods for our community. And so we're starting to see, some sort of businesses take on the leadership of finding ways to still deliver like CSA farm boxes to communities, both in need and both who can honor that system. And so if you're ever interested, feel free to connect with me offline, and I can share some of those resources to farm pickups, some other Seattle-based companies that can deliver goods to you, and add exciting stuff there. So
cool. Thank you, Tyler. I appreciate it. Next, I'm gonna ask Vivian, and I'm gonna read Lace and Jamila's responses, and then I'll come back to you, Rich, if you want. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool. All right, Vivian, what's on your mind?
Okay, so a lot of stuff that people have brought up. I think I'm trying not to be involved in everything, which is hard.
Yes.
But most specifically, I think my interests are in the economics of this, and feeling like we're headed for another recession like 2008. And like when I talk about rebuilding structures, it's kind of like needing to make them before it's too late. So I feel like the 2008 recession was a lot of the reason for gentrification right now. And knowing things like that, like for people who have energy and resources and jobs right now, like how do they put their efforts towards almost creating systems that or rules that keep these things from happening. So I think on a work level right now, I run Northwest Film Forum. For those who don't know, we are like being a media organization, like weirdly well positioned in this time, more so than a lot of arts nonprofits to be able to pivot pretty quickly. And it's also kind of shown like SIF just decided they're not going to do their festival this year. So we always thought like SIF is like the larger, more stable film organization in town, but they just laid off all their workers and we still have all of ours. And it's like kind of crazy. Like the landscape for Seattle's art scene could be totally different in like 3 months. So I think what we're working on right now is how to create a virtual platform that's sort of like a almost like a digital what do they call this, like public access network of for local organizations and artists to be able to like slot their material at a certain time and potentially use that as a fundraising mechanism. I don't know if it's going to work, we'll see, but there's already been some stuff that's come up that have made it like potentially like we would be able to get money for this project and give it out to artists and organizations. So that's what we're working on, and that's where my thinking is around infrastructure and just making sure we still have art organizations in 3 months.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, very, very much. I think feeling like we can't do everything is as an important lesson moment. So I just want to read what Lace wrote earlier. Lace said, I want to really look at how we can harness the positive momentum that is happening at the community level. Think about support for international district restaurants and small businesses. The community support is amazing. Hey, come back, chat. Hold on. The community support is amazing. How do we carry that on to support climate resilience and neighborhood needs? Later, she said, to add to community networks, I think it is evident that people want to help, and if we can give them small ways to support local, they will. How do we learn from this to tap into it later? And then Jamila spoke to this and says, I've been thinking about how all of our systems, in quotations, have basically been exposed. For example, companies all of a sudden letting employees work from home or insurance agencies opening enrollment during this time. Yes, I've been thinking about that too, how some people have been asking for these accommodations and now suddenly they're available, but they weren't before. Jamila says, I'm interested to see how moving forward we advocate for change, knowing that it's possible because it's happening now under these circumstances, but we'll probably go back to business as usual after. Oh, bye, Bethany. And Bethany said goodbye and said thank you. Jamila also added, I've been trying more than usual to make sure I support local businesses, but with trying to limit how much I'm leaving the house and for others too, I'm wondering how many people are having to order online, in particular order from Amazon, and the impact that could be having. And yeah, Vivian and Jamila touched base about that maybe Amazon has stopped doing non-vital deliveries, which is really interesting. I've seen they've been hiring a bunch. So there's a lot of movement. Thank you all so much. Rich, I want to throw it back to you if you would like to speak.
Yeah, so a lot of, I guess, what I've been thinking about is, and what other people have touched on, is kind of like the exposing of a lack of social safety nets that we have. And I really hope that this kind of moves the needle a little bit left, where people are kind of demanding this from our government. You know, things like mandatory paid sick time, and also recognizing that, like, you know, traditionally jobs that people, and obviously not people on this call, but that were considered low wage, like we now understand are vital to keeping to keeping society moving, and hopefully that they can uh sorry or just my dog hopefully the conversation can move towards livable wages for all workers, and yeah, and that's kind of, yeah, so I guess my takeaway, or kind of what I've been thinking a lot, is about like social safety nets in the large inadequacies that we have right now.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Y'all, this has been really inspiring to be, I mean, I'm not surprised, but like it feels really good to have all of this out on the table. So I do want to say we are starting to wrap up. We're getting to that time. So a few more things left, and I just wanted to say thank you so much, and to remind you that that Google Doc, I'm gonna get in there and work on it and try to get some transcripty type stuff. This has been recorded, so this is a document for us now. This is already archived. Thank goodness, because this was such a fruitful conversation. And I have a little treat for you on Facebook that's going to be a little archive experiment too, for us to stay connected and stay public about this conversation. But I want to toss it over to Em just for now for a little word. If she's there. Hello? Yes.
Did somebody mute me?
Oh, no.
I'll be quick. And thank you so much for those who have stuck with us. We have just like a final little call to action. But before we do that, to Vivian's point about organizations kind of weathering the storm, we also have been in a slightly more secure position than some of our peers, but we are being impacted. Tonight was going to be our biggest event of the spring. We're out a few $1,000s tonight. We were also planning on launching a membership program that we've been working on for several months. So we've chosen to adapt. But I have to do my due diligence and ask if you are able to support us with a contribution of any size, please do. I'm going to share a link, and with it, I'm going to share a link for an organization that I think if you're able to support to us, we'd implore you to also support them right now, and that's Chief Seattle Club, which is doing an enormous amount of direct support to some of the most vulnerable people in our city. So I'm sharing that link, and thank you so much again for joining us and for any support that you can offer.
Yeah. So I thank you so much. Thank you, Em. I really want to just commend all the work that people are doing to be here tonight and to stay connected. I know it's a lot. I know it can be intense, but it's so much fun to speak with you guys and hear from you. So our last two things. I would love to hear you guys, if you wouldn't mind filling out that exit survey. It's the same one. We can post the link again if we want, but it's that exact same survey. If you could revisit that, answer those 3 questions. And then the very last thing I have is we are looking to do a little bit of a community statement, probably on Sunday by end of day, that we're going to put together based on our findings from this. But we need you guys, and we want your input. So I'm going to do a little experiment. We're going to see how this goes. So there is I'm going to post this. Thank you, Jamila. This is our discussion in the event page for this group. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down and I'm going to pair y'all up. And so it's okay. Just try to remember who your pair is. And if you can connect on Facebook, it's going to be great. So there's a little on our We're Live, join us now on that page, that event page. I say, let's connect here in the comments. I'm going to pair you guys up and just have you each connect with each other in the comments. So for instance, Em is going to be my buddy. So Em can go into that thread and comment on my let's connect here, if that makes sense. So you'll see an example on there. Basically, we're all just going to comment on this thread and connect with each other. And the prompt is going to be, if we could think of the most inspiring like phrase, the thing that we want to put out to our community, our larger community from this, what would we like to do? What would we like to say to them? So our three words. Em, can you help me with our 3 words that we like to center on? Now,
Yeah.
thank you.
Amplify, align, and activate.
So those are our 3 words that we're going to be focusing on. So you don't have to fold them all in, but that's a prompt. I love, my neighbor is singing very loudly. I love it very much. So to say that again, there's a little comment section on the link I just sent you. And so there's Em just posted the prompt. So we're just going to continue this conversation. Jack and Jamila, if you could be a pair on there. If you guys know where to go. If not, you can connect in the chat box. If your partner doesn't comment on the thing, you can talk to somebody else that's on there. And then John and Kaniko, I'm going to pair you 2 up. Lace and Natalie, Rich and Tyler, and then Vivian, you and I can be buddies too. Does that make sense to anybody?
Not sure where
Did
we
you
go.
say that you already posted or that we're going to post?
I didn't press enter, so you can't find it. There it is. So I just posted it in the chat.
Okay, great.
It's really, so the last 2 asks I have of y'all, thank you for being so generous with your time, are just if you could fill out that survey and then just take a little visit to that discussion. And we're going to talk about the idea of a community statement that we can put out, sort of based in the spirit of this conversation that just happened.
And we'll give others a chance to contribute as well. This is live till Sunday. So if you're like, this was a great hour, S2, I got a jet, that's good too. But we'd love to have your feedback and your input.
Yeah, and invite others too to input. Cool. Thank you all so much for being here. Thanks for staying till 6:41. I appreciate you. I hope you all are in safe places. All of this stuff will be available on our Google Doc, and we will make sure that's available to you guys on our Facebook and other social.
Thank you, everyone. Be safe.
Be safe, be well. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.